Hi everybody, so this is A.R.S.E, the Random Son Explains, and I want to go back to the forensic mythology aspect of this uh, series that I'm doing, because the last couple of videos have been on physics, and like I said, I want to go back to the reason why I started this channel. So today we're going to talk about Adam and Eve, and the Garden of Eden, and who the snake in the Garden of Eden really was, or what the story is based on. So, yeah, so here we go. So like, the Garden of Eden is in thought to be in Baghdad or Iraq, I guess. And the general there's like a little area in Baghdad that they say is the Garden of Eden, but considering that the Western world considers that part of the world to be the cradle of civilization, or where the civilization that we know was based on, that's where it was started from. That's more than likely why it's thought to be in that area. And what I mean by that is the Sumerian culture, which was for the longest time, like when I was in high school, in the early parts of my college years, the Sumerians were always taught, or they were thought to be the oldest civilization, meaning that they had a city, written language, laws, organization, specialists. Yeah, basically a society, you know. So it was considered a civilization, religion, uh, stuff like that. So like I said in the video about the biblical flood being based on the Black Sea inundation, I think the flood story in the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is a Sumerian story, uh, is based on that Black Sea inundation. But the time difference, meaning from the Black Sea inundation to the height of the Sumerian civilization, is about 2,000 years. So the flood happened in 5600 BC. I'm old, so I want to use BC. 5600 BC, and the Sumerians were at the height of their power, like around 3200 BC. So basically, like 2,000 years later, or 5,000 years ago. Uh, so the written cuneiform, Sumerian cuneiform, and the interesting thing about that is, because they wrote on tablets, and is that that's the basis for the modern alphabet. More than likely it was some type of phonetic symbolism, meaning like the language already existed, and they made the alphabet to kind of match what the words were. Um, so, yeah, maybe. And the other thing too about the Sumerian language, like I brought up, there's two distinct dialects. There's the old language, which is, for simple objects, and then there's a different, or what appears to be a different dialect for what are considered specialists, like bakers, um, for brewers and stuff like that, fishermen, navigators, people that had like, um, I don't want to say scientific, but like the technological words are based on one dialect, and then the agricultural words are based on another, because that's also too where agriculture was started, and maybe like 5, 6, 7,000 years before even the Sumerian culture came to power, people were already learning how to farm or teaching themselves how to farm in that area. I mean, because if you go back to uh, right after the Younger Dryas period, the people in Western Asia are teaching the people in Europe farming, like 10,000 years ago, give or take, roughly. About the time of Göbekli Tepe. For those of you familiar with that, it's a city, or a temple, I guess, not really a city because nobody lived there. Like a temple or astrological marker dating to right after the Younger Dryas, maybe about 1,000 years after. So there's Pillar 47, if you Google it, Pillar 47. you should get the return of Göbekli Tepe's Pillar 47. There's the vulture and the 3 sunrises, right? So what it's thought to represent is the night sky. So the base of the pillar is where, you know, the constellations that they had named were. So the vulture is thought to be a Sagittarius, where it's at now. There's Scorpio on there. There's a couple other ones. You know, like basically the astrological signs that we're kind of familiar with. So that's on Pillar 47, or some of them. So like I said, there's the vulture, which is thought to be Sagittarius now, the Scorpio, and a couple other ones. And then above that are 3 sunrises. Or what I think are 3 sunrises. And the reason why that's significant is like those 3 sunrises on the horizon. So if you put the center due east, right? And the sun comes up. So if you move the sun to the left, I believe, you know, like, or the sun moves anyways along the horizon where it comes up, but there's always due east. On the spring and fall equinox, it rises straight in a line on due east. Behind it in the night sky, this is what I was trying to get, I was kind of misexplaining right now. Behind it in the night sky are the astrological signs in the sky, in the night, the made of the stars. Those move, you know. So, like, the Sphinx, which I want to do one on the Sphinx, which is pretty interesting in another video, is thought to have been a lion. And the last time that a lion, Leo, rose due east was 14,000 years ago. Okay, so back to Göbekli Tepe and what that pillar represents. But also in Göbekli Tepe, there's a snake with a human head on it, which is pretty significant, and I'll bring up why. And so Göbekli Tepe ties into this because it's of the marker to right after the Younger Dryas event, which if you saw the Thor video with the solar storm so intense it melted the glaciers, burned, and then flooded the earth in that order, you know. But the Upper Dryas event, the one that is thought to have destroyed Atlantis, is a comet. Like I brought up in The Lost Sailor, and then the California tribes had a story of the dog being jealous and mad and bringing death. And there's a couple other ones. A.R.S.E, the Inuit story, I forgot the goddess's name, but she falls out of a canoe after having her fingers cut off. The Aboriginal people in Australia, even though they're on the other side of the world, they tell a story of a star coming to, a goddess coming to the ground and leaving ice in her footprints. So right now the comet, I mean, I believe that it was a comet, but it's not accepted for as being the upper. Some people think it was another solar flare, or you know, something like that, where like, you know, there was 2 solar flares in close succession. The one in 11,600 years ago, which is what the story of Thor or killing the ice giants is based on. And then, but I don't think that's what happened. I think it's a comet. I think the reason why they can't find the impact is because they hit the ocean. The Pacific Ocean, more specifically, creating miles high tsunamis. And so like along the coastal shore, some parts of California, you see these rolling hills coming back down into the ocean. I mean, there's cliffs in some parts, but I'm talking about like the area where the area I'm familiar with. There's these rolling hills that come into the ocean, and if you go to the beach, or we go to the beach a lot, and you look down at the waves as they're going back out to shore, you'll see these little ripples in the sand. So you can only imagine the amount of water it took to make that land, these hills that are a few hundred feet high, ripple like that, you know. Anyway, though, so Adam and Eve and the snake. In North America, or in the Americas, there was snake worship was widespread. There's a snake mound in Ohio, like I brought up in the other video, the shadows of the serpent on the Temple of the Sun in Mexico, and a bunch of other snake icons all over the Americas. So going back to the Garden of Eden, so like I said, the Torah wasn't written until around 300 BC. So this is like 3,000 years after the height of the Sumerian culture, where I think the story comes from. So Adam and Eve were in the Garden of Eden, and God gets mad at them because Eve eats an apple or some shit like that. And so the symbology of the Adam and Eve story and her reaching up for the apple is pretty interesting, which I'll bring up in another video. So the snake comes. Oh, the snake came and tempted her. So the snake is not evil, and if I remember my Gnostic readings, there's no mention that the snake is the devil, that he's evil. He's just wise or has wisdom, and that's important because, like I said, at the after the Upper Dryas event, I think that the civilizations that were in the northern part of the world hemisphere, and especially the North American ones that with the heavy snake worship, spread out all over the world. Because around after the Younger Dryas event, which was the solar flare I was telling you guys about, there's stories all over the world of knowledge bringers, and so, I mean, how advanced? Oh, Aslan, the Aztecs. Sorry, they tell a story where they walked from Aslan. So the interesting thing about American history and it being interpreted by Europeans is that they routinely divide the age of the artifacts by 10. I mean, it's routine for them. So like there's pyramids that have been redated in Mexico, because Mexico has more pyramids than Egypt. The Americas have literally thousands of pyramids. Egypt has a few hundred. Anyways though, so they redated some of these pyramids and they're like 10,000 years old, a lot of them, or older, you know. And so like, I think, you know, partly to do, you know, because the European mind is not as adept at conceptualizing, you know, like abstract ideas. You know, like when I go online and I argue with, you know, white supremacists all the time, I would like to point out that the European is just a natural bootlicker. That's what they do. They follow orders. You know, they didn't learn freedom until they interacted with the Native Americans or North Native Americans and saw that people just doing what they wanted to do. You know what I'm saying? Like, and so that's the basis for the idea of freedom and the American Constitution. You know, it's based on the Native American lifestyle. Anyways, though, I'm going way off track. Back to Adam and Eve. So yeah, I mean, obviously they didn't exist. You know, 75,000 years ago, there was a super volcano eruption in Southeast Asia that reduced the human world population to about 50,000. There's a range. I've seen ranges from 15,000, to 100,000. But the most accepted number is like there was around 50,000 human beings, Homo sapiens like us, left on the whole planet 70,000 years ago. And from those 50,000, we get 8 billion now, currently. So like, is the Adam and Eve story just a long memory? Adam and Eve story is just when it was finally written down, you know. What I mean by that is like it was always an oral history story of when the earth was, you know, practically depopulated. Alright, so, and then the snake, like I said, being a wisdom bringer, he more than likely ties in with all the other tales of the North Americans especially. I think they were the most affected. The survivors of the upper dryas have been going around the world and bringing knowledge. I mean, there's evidence for a civilization in North America. That so the people, I don't want to say they've always been on North America, but there's evidence of human activity dating back 130,000 years. There's a mastodon that was found in San Diego that appears to have been worked on by a humanoid. I want to say maybe it wasn't a Homo sapien. It could have been another Homo erectus or whatever. So the other interesting thing about the Native North Americans, is that they have a DNA marker that's from a ghost people, meaning that there's a people that no longer exist that makes up part of the genetic of northern Native Americans. And going back to the story about the Aztecs walking down from Aztlan and Atlantis, if you compare the spelling, are really similar. And I saw recently that in Utah, in the high deserts of Utah, they found some interesting ruins and like cave art. And if you take I think in the story they say that there was 4 rivers that connected, and so I think they might have found Aztlan in the high deserts of Utah. In New Mexico, there's these weird structures that were like churches, kind of. There was people from all over the Americas that came to New Mexico to worship. There's the stories that I like, the oral traditional stories, about like the dog bringing death to the world. That's a story about the Upper Dryas event in the comet, hitting Earth. The one about the wolf chasing a woman and her going to the moon, that could be the same thing, the wolf being the comet that appeared to come from Sirius, chasing a woman, through the sky, whatever, and then passing by the moon or hitting the moon, which is, interestingly enough, there's more damage to the moon on the Earth-facing side than on the other side, the dark side. So, like, whatever hit the Earth also hit the moon. Anyways, so like I said, I think the snake in the Bible, in the Garden of Eden story, was survivors, plural, more than likely, of whatever civilization was in North America at the time of the Upper Dryas. Oh, the reason why I think they were is, if you look at the behavior of the buffalo, they seem really domesticated. Like, they don't move like cows. And I use this as an analogy. How long do you think it'll take for cows to resort to wild animal behavior after humans disappear? I don't think it's going to happen instantly. So I think buffalo was their cattle. There's the concept of Turtle Island. So if you look at all of North America as a whole, just a landmass, it looks like a turtle. There's the maps of what appear to be Antarctica, and where they came from, because the man who drew the map in the 1500s said he got the source were older maps, some of them much older. So, like, yeah, I think, to tie it all back together, that, 12,800 years ago, a comet hits the Earth, the civilization in the northern parts of the world that might have been connected, because there's some really interesting ruins in Siberia. Like, all the northern hemisphere people, especially the ones in North America, fled to the southern part of the world. Like, they went from above the equator to below the equator. I think, like, the Asian and Europeans didn't move until, because they would have been affected by the Upper Dryas event, but what I mean is just, like, because of the mini ice age it created, that's when they moved down. And that intervening 1,200 years where the northern part of the planet seems to have been frozen over. And then you have the solar event, in 11,600 years ago, which is what the story of Thor is based on, where all that ice gets melted and the flood and all that. But that's not the flood in the Bible, that's a different flood. So what else? Okay, yeah, so like I said, I think the snake in the Garden of Eden was just a survivor of Atlantis, and Adam and Eve were just a representation of a time when the earth was almost depopulated, and it really did seem like there was only two people on earth, you know. So yeah, you know, there's that. I guess that's it. I'm trying to think. No, I covered a pretty good deal. Oh, so the Sumerians also have a story about somebody walking out of the water and bringing them civilization. That might, anyways, though, like I said, so there was heavy snake worship in North America. They are the ones that were most affected by the upper dark event. The survivors of the deserts of New Mexico, there's these footprints that are thousands of years old. They're really fascinating, but they all seem to be heading south, like they're fleeing something. The animals, the people, you know, and there's even some where they stop to turn back. I mean, they're hauntingly beautiful, these footprints in New Mexico. So, like I said, if something happened, you know, and the people that survived North America, they went around the world bringing, you know, knowledge, and those stories eventually got written down, you know, beginning 5,000 years ago, when the written word began, you know, because there was, in the Greek world anyways, there was the argument against writing shit down was because, like, you would learn something without any context if you read it later on, you know what I'm saying? So, like, if you pick up a book and you just read it, and you have no context for the book, you don't know what's true or what's not true. You don't, like, something like that. Anyway, though, I like writing, I love reading, so, you know, I don't think there's anything wrong with the written word. You know, as long as you use the discernment. Like, I read literally thousands of books, you know. Like, when I was in college taking ancient literature, I put it in the back of my head that I was going to read everything written from the Epic of Gilgamesh, which is the oldest written story, to the Gutenberg Bible, which is the first printed book. And I was going to read everything in between, you know, or try to read everything in between. I mean, I've hit all the major, you know, books, like the Greek plays, Chinese poetry, you know, Epic of Gilgamesh itself, the Akkadian tablets that I've brought up before, Egyptian history, Libyan history, the Phoenician history. You know, like, I've read a lot. You know what I'm saying? Like, so anyway, what I'm trying to say is just, like, I put all this together in my head, and you know, so, like, it is based on. It's not just, I'm not just making it up. It's based on what I've read over the last 40 years. You know, because I when I was a little kid, I used to love to read. And one of the things I used to like to read was the Bible, because at that time I thought it was the real history of the world. So, I mean, I read the Bible hundreds of times, cover to cover, at least 40 times, you know. I remember one year I sat down, I read the Bible cover to cover 3 times, just to do it, you know. I mean, 3 different versions of the Bible, but I read the Bible cover to cover 3 times in a year, you know, among other books. So, like I said, you know, this theory that about the snake in the Garden of Eden being a North American survivor is not far-fetched. It's more than likely what happened. But I want to cut it short because this went on way longer than I thought it would. So namaste. Good night. Like, share, and subscribe. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Good night.